So now if we have repeated plays, it sort of changes what players do. So going back to the example up here, trying to form a cartel. So for example, if Southwest and Delta know they're going to be flying, offering flights between Oakland and Palm Springs for years, then very quickly they assess their behavior. So let's assume that Delta decides to cheat on the agreement and charge to charge $200 by dropping the price to $150. And so let's say back up here, Southwest holds to the agreement not to cheat, and Delta cheats. So Delta takes advantage and earns higher profits for a short period of time. Well, Southwest can respond to that. Southwest can do what's called tit for tat. You drop your price, we're going to drop our price. So we'll drop our price as well. And that's why dominant strategy, you might end up here. It's sort of a signal from Southwest to Delta that if you want to play that game, we can play it as well. It's counterproductive, but again, you're going to cheat, we're going to cheat. And maybe that can cause maybe Delta to respond by going back to the agreement of charging higher fares. Southwest can also do what's called a grim trigger strategy. Really drop your price, not just a low price to $150, cut it down maybe to $25. Give Delta a good punch in the stomach, saying, you want to play this game? We're going to play this game. We're going to play it worse than you did. We're going to decimate this market based on what you're doing. And that really is a way to punish your competitor, kind of shock them, and see if Delta will respond by going back to the cartel agreement. Now we can also have a sequential game when one player makes a decision at a time. Let's say we have two players. We have Jack and Jill and Jack, and they could be competing on some kind of a market. And so Jill has two choices, a high price or a low price. And so if Jill has low price, then Jack can respond as well, high price, low price. You can see that if Jill goes low price, then Jack has incentive to also go low and have 8,000 compared to 3,000. And then Jill has a high price, then Jack has two choices again, 9,000 or 12,000, and again low price. So you would say that in this case Jack has a dominant strategy by charging the low price. And so Jill, by knowing that Jack has a dominant strategy, if you know the information, then she looks like she has two choices, either 3,000 or 8,000, and then she's going to go low as well. So games can be a bit more complicated like that, but again, you want to think about the dominant strategy of the players. And this is a way, again, to get an understanding of how your competitors are going to respond before you take a certain strategy, take a certain action. Another one that I find interesting is the low price guarantee. We always think this is great for consumers. A store like Best Buy announces they're going to match any price, any lower price than their price for the next 30 days after the purchase of an item. And we think that's a great deal. But it's really a clever way for a store like Best Buy, a pretty large player in the market, to make an announcement to the competition that if you want to play this game by cutting prices, it's not going to work, because we're going to automatically cut our prices well and match yours. And in fact, it's going to be retroactive. So if you cut your price on us, we're going to go back and give the price cut 30 days back to our customers. And by making that announcement, they pretty much announced to all the competition that lowering your prices is not going to do you any good, because Best Buy is going to automatically match them. So we think the low price guarantee is good for consumers. It actually is a way for some of the larger players to try to prevent price competition. And then the last game, I want to look at a game where there's only one dominant strategy. So here we have two strategies. We can have TV commercials and no commercials for Coke and Pepsi. And so this is the payoff matrix. And so let's look at Coca-Cola's perspective, Coke's perspective. And let's say Pepsi, say, has TV commercials. So here's Pepsi. And we have two choices for Coca-Cola. Can have TV commercials and no commercials. So it's 40 or 20. And so Coke will have TV commercials as well. And then if Pepsi has no commercials, then Coke has these two choices, 60 million and 50 million. Again, 60 million. So Coke has a dominant strategy. They're going to run commercials. It looks like the commercials are work better for Coca-Cola based on Pepsi, based on the payoff here, which makes sense because Coke tends to make more profit than Pepsi does. So now let's look at Pepsi's perspective. If Coke runs TV commercials, then Pepsi is here. 10 million and 5 million. It looks like Pepsi should run TV commercials. And then if Coke has no commercials, I should say note there, then Pepsi has these two choices, run commercials or no commercials. In this case, it's no. So you would say that Pepsi has no dominant strategy. Their strategy depends on what Coca-Cola does. Can we get a Nash equilibrium? Yes, if we make one assumption that Pepsi knows the payoff matrix. And this again is why companies hire a lot of people, spend a lot of money to use game theory to get a better understanding of what their competitors are going to do. So Pepsi knows this. Pepsi knows they know that Coke has a dominant strategy, and they know that they're going to run TV commercials. So then what should Pepsi do? If Pepsi knows that, then Pepsi has two options, TV commercials or none. In this case, it's going to be TV commercials as well. So even though it's not a dominant strategy, Pepsi, by knowing Coke's dominant strategy, will definitely do TV commercials, and therefore now we have a Nash equilibrium. No player can unilaterally better their position. So market efficiency for oligopolies, this is a hard one. There's a lot of problems with oligopolies, and that's why concentration ratios are watched closely. The Antitrust Division of the Justice Department is worried about cartels forming with oligopolies, and so that's why if you go from like maybe 10 competitors down to 3 competitors, that becomes more of a worry for law enforcement, because they're worried more they're going to act like a cartel. So pretty much if oligopolies are competitive, they tend to be okay. If they act like a cartel, a monopoly, not okay. And so it's hard to judge the performance of oligopolies. It has to be case by case. So many factors involved. The level of concentration, the level of the barriers. If they're low barriers, not much of a problem. If they're high barriers, maybe a problem. Do they cooperate, cartel, or compete? That's a big one. If they cooperate, then force them to stop that, file lawsuits against them, cease and desist orders. Or what kind of products do they produce? They have economies of scale. Again, that's useful. Again, economies of scale brings down the cost, and so forth. So it's hard to say, but the one thing we do know, the smaller the number of competitors, the easier it is to collude. And that's why one of the main factors when we look at markets that are oligopolies is how many competitors are there. And that's why those 4-firm, 8-firm concentration ratios and other measurements that we looked at in the chapter of monopoly are so critical in antitrust enforcement. Okay, I'll stop there for chapter 10.